And g'day, my name is Ozzy Stern, country Victorian gamer of Star Wars Armada, Star Wars Legion, X-Wing, Battletech, Flames of War, Dystopian Wars, Games Workshop, many more. As promised, today's video I am currently editing and producing on the final steps that I've taken to paint my Star Wars Legion Ahsoka, and also the starting phases of painting and assembly the T-47 speeder. So just a little bit of history before we go on to actually looking at it. So Ahsoka, pretty simple. I have completed painting most of it before this most recent video, and it was challenging to say the least, and I'll tell you why. You can see that I have left some of the parts on the sprue because I found it easier to paint with. The main body I have successfully painted in colours very similar to the actual image that you saw on the packet that it came in. I used a bit of gold and bronze on those pads, as well as some plate steel on the boots to give that nice sheen. With the lightsabers, the white on the blade is coloured with very much a little bit of off-white on the handle, and then also some fluoro yellow for the actual blade itself. Now, the only thing I have left to do is this head, which, since I've left it off, is quite difficult to paint on its own. It's also the case that although I've got the face really well, the actual colours in the actual hair, tentacle, cranial features is going to be rather interesting. However, first off, I'm going to use some of this cold grey to do the headband around the top of her forehead area. This, I'm thinking, is going to be probably the most easiest part about doing the hair itself, as this band is pretty much easy to see with using the magnifying glasses that I have. Obviously, I do want to keep an eye on it, and it is a little bit fiddly. Using these reverse tweezers, in that when you squeeze them, they open rather than close, is handy, and holding on to it where I am is pretty good because I can get a bit more ability and flexibility to move around. Once I have done the grey, obviously there's those reflective areas on it as well that I'm going to have to do. And to that, I'm going to end up using a simple colour, a plate mail, to do those individual sections when I need to. I also now need to try and do these blue bits. The first attempt that I'm doing, that you can see, is using basically a very thin brush, using some Macragge blue or ultramarine blue, and slowly going through where the train of the face indicates where it is, but it didn't quite work out so well. So I went back and instead used a blue wash to go over it and then dry brushed some white on it. This produced, I guess, a fair to good result for the head, and quite a lot of the underside of the tails are hidden because of the body. I think if I did it again, I'd be taking a lot more time and probably dry brushing it a lot more times to get the clean cut of the white against the blue. But for now, it's fairly good, and I'll probably run with it. Now on to the next. So, that was quite hard, I found, doing all of that. And I'm not sure if I would be able to do it again in the way. I might use some different techniques that might have made it a bit better. I just don't know. Anyway, on to the T-47. So, I didn't want to do the same T-47 speeder that we've seen in Rogue, in Empire Strikes Back. Nor did I want to do the one that you saw exactly in the likes of most recent Kenobi series either. I went down the path that I wanted to choose one that I saw briefly, very, very briefly at the back of a comic back in the 1990s, late 1980s, something like that, in a Star Wars comic. And it was called a Desert Speeder. Now, it was interesting enough that it never actually saw the light of day. It didn't actually come up in terms of any movies. The Sand Speeder was originally created for Kenner's Star Wars themed Epic Continued toy line, planned for release in 1986. However, the line was ultimately cancelled by Lucasfilms. However, by this stage, some of the promotion art had already been released to the comics. So some of the things that you can see is that it had additional maneuvering vanes along the sides of the cockpit area. It had a turret at the back rather than a fixed mounting for the harpoon, and additional weaponry at the front. All in all, the model looked pretty good. Anyway, it had a very much a yellow tone. It very much like the actual wall behind me in many ways. It did have flaring of oranges and reds on it, and also the addition of a number of extra, not maneuvering vanes, but maybe aerodynamic vanes, sort of thing, along the edges, sort of thing. And it was great. It looked quite good. The next time I saw it, and this was a couple of years later, I saw Decipher, a company that produced the Star Wars customized card game, brought out a card of the Sand Speeder. Cue image. And again, it looked quite yellow, similar to my wall, and looked pretty good. It didn't look weird having those extra veins or anything. All it did was it took the coloration of the desert and basically went down the thought pattern of, if the speeder was being used in a more desert environment or plains where there's lots of yellows, what sort of colouring would it use instead of white? Because you've got to remember that the Empire Strikes Back, it was a pretty much a white. And even the one that we saw in the Kenobi series, it had more of a metallic, like it wasn't really painted at all too much. So I like the idea of doing that paint job of that colour. So I've got my T-47s ready, prepping to get sprayed. I've got my pilots separate, the canopy separate. I've got the weapon will be painted separately, but it's being magnetised at the moment. As well as I've cleaned off the bottom to make it able to be attached to a wedge a bit better. With the normal Legion one, all I'm doing is just keeping the weapons off. To this, I am going to paint it the skeleton bone, and it looks pretty good. I will leave it to dry for the moment. So now that I've done the undercoat in the skeleton bone, it looks pretty good. I wouldn't want to go any further towards my other yellow that I've got, which is desert sand, like the wall behind me. I think going just to the initial phase of that cream blend, much like the ceiling behind me, there, that colour, is actually quite good. Then I can introduce things like washes and other complementary colours to denote things like the unit markings, some of the weathering effects sort of thing. I'm going to put a wash on it, as you can see in the video already, that I've added Reichland Flesh Wash to give that a little bit of a rusty look, or I guess you could say it's been sand beaten a bit, and therefore in many ways it looks pretty good. So this is just some initial painting that I'm going to start. Obviously, with painting the models, I always like to pre-check and also thin out the paint a little bit. I'm going to do a straight black for the actual canopy for the original Fantasy Flight Games, and also use this fiery orange to do the unit marking on the front area. So trying to make sure that the paint fits on correctly and gently, I'm just going to carefully run through the paint schemes for this. And I do like the orange, it feels good. Now that I've finished the first stage, I'm just putting it right next to Ashoka so you can see what it looks like. I've got some unit markings on it, as well as the Reichland flesh tone on the back. And you can see that I've put the grime on the Reichland flesh on the left, while on the right it's plain. I'm also going to do some metal and some null wash on different areas just to give it a bit more shading. Now for my other one, the other T-47, I've got a base that I'll be assembling shortly. So they're the videos that I've done. And so I still got a bit of weathering to do. Still got a bit here and there to do. And I'll still do another video in the coming weeks on that process. I also have started using the same color schemes that I've done for the T-47 that I've got, that you've seen, for the other T-47, but I'm also going to be doing the likes of the pilots first, because this one that I got from Garfie's Games, you got the pilot and stuff like that, and I'm going to take a bit more time on that one because I want it to be really much a focus for it. But for now, please like, please subscribe. Please leave a comment if you're interested in this video, or check out any of my other videos that I've done on Star Wars Armada, Battletech, Dystopian. But for now, from Aussie Stern, I'll say I'll catch you on the table next time, and bye for now.